All right, it is the B Block Podcast, and I am your host, Brandon Scott, coming to you live on YouTube. Also coming to you wherever it is that you get your podcast. If you're not subscribed to the B Block Podcast, make sure that you do that. If you're listening on the audio platforms, make sure that you check us out on YouTube. Subscribe, rate, review, do all of that cool stuff. The reason why we're here, I think y'all know what we're here for. Obviously, the Texans just came off of a critical victory over the Tennessee Titans over the weekend. Even if it was one of the most boring football games that you ever watched in your life. And I think I made this point last night when I was on live. The Texans and Titans have now played two of the most boring games. Gotta be two of the worst games of the entire NFL slate all season. Between that game that they played in Houston earlier in the season and the one that they just played in Nashville yesterday. But nevertheless, the Texans come out victorious, even on last second field goal. And the thing that everybody was waiting on, because look, the expectation was for the Texans to go out there and beat the Titans, who were the worst team in football. You had no excuse to lose to that team. Really had no excuse for that game to be competitive. But everybody was expecting them to win that game. The big thing that a lot of people were looking for after the game and coming into Monday, some you might even say waiting with bated breath, was to see on a short week whether CJ Stroud would be available to the Texans, whether he would be practicing, and if so, how soon. Because it's not like you got a whole lot of time between Sunday and Thursday night's game. And so what do we find out? What was the news of Monday as far as the Texans are concerned? The fact that not only is CJ Stroud still in the concussion protocol, which you might expect, but not only is he still in the concussion protocol, but he appears to be a step behind his contemporaries who have been in the concussion protocol, or at least went into the concussion protocol at the same time as he did. If you remember, going back to that game, going back to the Broncos game when CJ Stroud got knocked out of the game, he wasn't the only Texan to go into the concussion protocol. It was CJ Stroud, it was Titus Howard, and it was also Jalen Petrie. Jalen Petrie was one, well, really both. Titus Howard was really one where I didn't see the play where it happened, and I just looked up and he was out of the game. Jalen Petrie, I didn't necessarily notice him, sustaining a concussion. That was kind of a surprise on the injury report. Of course, we saw what happened to CJ Stroud because it was a big play, and of course, because he's the quarterback. But the news here to me is that Titus Howard obviously came back and was able to practice and play in this past game, was able to play on Sunday. Now, of course, he went down with an injury, and we'll talk about sort of the injury report and how things are looking for the Texans going into this short week. But he was able to come back. He missed a game, was able to come back in this past game, this most recent game. Jalen Petrie also missed the next game along with CJ Stroud, right? They've missed the last two games. But the difference in the injury report on Monday was, and of course, they went through a walkthrough, right? They're not going to be out there hitting each other or doing like these full-fledged padded practices on a short week late in the season at this point, and all, honestly fighting for their playoff lives at this point. So you could expect them to be going through walkthroughs and very light practices at this point of the season. But not only did he not is he not out of the concussion protocol at this point, but he's not even practicing or participating in walkthroughs. And that was the difference between him and Jalen Petrie, was that Jalen Petrie, at the very least, in this walkthrough, while still in the concussion protocol, is listed as a limited participant, which leads you to believe he is at least a step forward, a step closer toward being cleared of the concussion protocol. Whereas, of course, CJ Stroud listed as a non-participant, you would have to figure that means that he is not as close or a step behind Jalen Petrie in terms of making it through the concussion protocol. The only non-participants in this walkthrough for the Texans, the only non-participants were CJ Stroud and linebacker Jamal Hill, who mostly plays on special teams. So CJ Stroud is the headliner here because everybody else is either a limited participant. We know some of the guys who have been dealing with stuff, but they either were limited participants in this walkthrough or they were listed as full participants. So that's noteworthy and newsworthy, because if he's not even limited on Monday, you figure, does he have a chance to maybe be limited on Tuesday? And if he's limited on Tuesday, does that give him a chance to be cleared by Wednesday or before, at least before this game on Thursday? Like exactly how far, because all we know right now is did not participate. How far down the ledger is did not participate for CJ Stroud in terms of his recovery? And I think at this point, once you get this news on Monday, you got to be approaching the rest of the week. You got to be approaching Thursday, even as we're wrapping up Monday night and going into Tuesday morning. You got to start approaching it like CJ Stroud is not going to be there. You got to start approaching it. I know this is already a conversation that's been had even last week, when I think it was Aaron Wilson at KPRC who reported that CJ Stroud was still experiencing some symptoms from the concussion. And so, like you had to think, once you heard that last week, that the following week on a short week would be in jeopardy anyway. But now that we're here, now that we are in the following week, you got to look at it as, hey, CJ Stroud is not, more than likely, not going to be available to you. At the very least, be looking at what does that look like exactly. And I understand if that worries some people. I figured that's got to worry some people. The thought of, you're finally back to 500. Shout out to Davis Mills for what he's done over the last couple of games of keeping you in it, playing good enough football, good enough backup, giving you a good enough performance as a backup quarterback to kind of keep you in the mix and to keep you alive, and not just keep you alive, but be a crucial and important part of why you won these last couple of games. Going back to the Jaguars game, obviously the go-ahead touchdown, the 14-yard scramble, and of course 3rd and 16 to Nico Collins, and really just the overall sort of poise and calm that you've seen from him. Like, credit to him. But most people want their starting quarterback, especially if they believe in their starting quarterback. Now, that's been its own discussion. It's something that we've been talking about here on the podcast and on the radio shows lately, on how much people actually believe in CJ Stroud. This turn that we've seen on CJ Stroud over the last several weeks, and especially since he's been gone and Davis Mills has been performing. So certainly I don't want to dismiss the reality of a lot of people just like not believing in CJ Stroud, as much as it may shock me and as much as I may disagree with it. But for all of us who do believe in CJ Stroud, of course you want him to be out there. Of course you prefer him over Davis Mills. But I think that it's time to start thinking about what this is going to look like with Davis Mills, and the fact that, hey, even though he got you to 500, you're going to need him to get you over it. You're going to need him to get you to 6-5. 5-5 ain't going to cut it. Davis Mills is probably going to have to be the quarterback that not only saved your season over the last couple of weeks, but the one that takes your season into the next stage, the one that levels up your season, the one that leads your beleaguered team, and more importantly, your beleaguered offense, into battle on Thursday Night Football in prime time in front of God and everybody else, in front of the whole world, against the league MVP, who y'all beat last year, but nobody seems to really remember that in his MVP season, because it was basically just a blip on the radar. And now you're asking the backup to go in there and beat that guy's team, if you will. Now, if you lose the game, I've kind of made it seem really apocalyptic if they were to lose the game. I guess that's not actually the case, but that's how I would feel. And it's definitely how I would feel now, based off of how they played against Tennessee. If they were to backdoor that one with a loss, I mean, how you feel about their chances in a crowded AFC trying to get into that wild card spot with the Chiefs, the Bills, the Ravens, and all of these teams. Jacksonville's right there. All of these teams that are fighting for that spot. The Chargers, who I know nobody believes in, but all these teams right there in the mix. You don't feel great about that, going to 5-6. Indy, 2 games against Indy right there in front of you, and the Chiefs on the schedule as well. You go on 3 in those. Go 2-1, but you go on 3 in those, right? Like, could you split with? Could you beat the Chiefs and split with the Colts? Certainly. Could you even sweep it? Far fetched, I think, but yeah, it's in play. But what do you think is more likely? 1-2, 0-3, especially you lose to the Bills, especially if we're talking about the team that we just watched on Sunday. Not feeling great about that. So now that we've kind of gone through the history of it all, to the point, right? To the point. I don't think that I'm picking the Texans to win this game. In fact, I'm not going to even beat around the bush here. I'm not picking the Texans to win this game. Didn't mean to mislead you with the title of this YouTube video, of this podcast, or of the point of what I'm trying to say here. Did not mean to mislead you, but I want to be clear about what it is that I'm about to say here. I don't think that the Texans are going to win this game. I don't have a lot of confidence in them based off of what I watched on Sunday. Okay. And we've been doing a recency bias thing, or at least I have. I'll speak for myself. Been doing this recency bias thing with the Texans all year, where they're up, they're down, they're hot, they're cold. What exactly are they? What exactly is this? Have they turned a corner? Have they found something offensively? Have they found an identity? Have they found a way to run the football? Have they found a way to get their weapons involved? All of this, like, we've gone through all of this in the first 10 games of the season, and it just it just doesn't leave a real solid taste in your mouth after what you saw against the Tennessee Titans. However, I do think that there is a formula or a scenario where the Texans handle business, maybe even shock the world, and actually beat the Buffalo Bills on Thursday Night Football. All right. So here's my thought process on how I think that the Texans can actually beat the Bills on Thursday Night Football, even without CJ Stroud. Number one, we were just talking about it, Davis Mills and his proficiency, if you will. He has been good these last couple of games in Stroud's absence. I will point out that Davis Mills has been largely accurate with the football. He's made mostly good decisions with the football. Now, am I thinking about the Broncos game or the Jaguars game? There have been some moments that were touch and go there. Obviously, they start the Jags game with an interception in the first few plays of the game. But for the most part, I feel like he's been accurate and he's made good decisions. And even when he hasn't necessarily been either accurate or made good decisions, I think one thing that he gets a lot of credit for, Davis Mills, that is the level of poise that he's shown and the toughness that I think he's shown. All of those things are, I think he gets a lot of respect from people for those characteristics, for those traits, right? I think that's part of the reason why the team has some confidence, maybe a little bit more confidence in the backup quarterback than what you might normally see if the backup has to play. So I would point out that just the fact that Davis Mills has not been a disaster, or that the backup quarterback situation for the Texans has not looked catastrophic in any way in these last couple of games, that part alone gives me a sense for, man, the Texans can at least go out there and run their stuff and move the football. I talked about this yesterday on the last stream. Like, as awful as that first drive ended, and as awful as it was that the Texans struggled as badly as they did to score the football against the Titans the other day, they come out firing. They come out with a couple of third down conversions. They're moving the football down the field. Davis Mills even took a couple of shots. Nico Collins over the middle of the field was money. Nico Collins really basically anywhere was money. I feel like they were finding something in Jaden Higgins. That's somebody who I've talked about both here on the podcast and on television recently, is somebody that I think this offense really needs to unlock, really need to figure out a way to get him the football. D'Amico Ryans has talked about like how much it matters who you're getting the football to, who you're giving the football to. And I think that's somebody whose targets should continue to increase while you still make sure that Nico Collins is the focal point. But as far as Davis Mills go, or as far as Davis Mills goes, I would say again the accuracy, the decision making, and the poise and the toughness that he's shown. I think a lot of people respect it, and it's something that you can at least feel comfortable with if that's what you have to deal with going into a Thursday night situation against the Bills. Now, speaking of the Bills, this part is no secret or no mystery to anybody, especially anybody that's really been following football this year. But the Bills defense is not that great. It's not. It's actually it's not great at all. I would say that it's not even good. Some might call it Swiss cheese, but at the very least, I would point out that the Bills defense is is not so great that Mills would be overwhelmed, right? I would just say that Davis Mills has already faced better defenses since he's been thrown into the fire with CJ Stroud's injury. And that would be against the Denver Broncos and then even the Jacksonville Jaguars. I'd put their defense, particularly with their pass rush, but I thought their defensive backs played a pretty good game as well. Like I would, and Brandon's bringing up. We're gonna get to this point in a second. Brandon's bringing up the Bills' defense and how much they're giving up on the ground. Definitely a valid point, and I was gonna make my way there, but I would just point out while we're focusing on Mills for a second, okay? And it is true that their passing defense would be the strength of the defense as opposed to defending the run, and we'll get to that in a second. But the Bills' defense is something that I feel like Davis Mills should be able to manage after the experiences he's had over these last 2.5 games that he's played in. Now, before I get to the run defense, as Brandon is talking about here in the chat, and I want to shout out Brandon, appreciate you for being here, and anybody else that wants to get involved. Make sure if y'all got any questions, y'all got any comments, y'all get involved here in the comment section. And that's also a note for you audio only listeners, a feature obviously on the YouTube page that you don't get on the audio platforms. Plug that real quick. But to the Texans defense, I want to point out this. Okay, I already said the Bills defense is not something that Mills can't manage, like not something that he is going to be overwhelmed by any stretch. Then on the other side of it, the Texans defense itself, I feel like should be able to match up with the Bills. Okay, or maybe a better way to put it is that if there's any defense in the league that can contain the Bills, it should be the Texans. Okay, we're talking about the number one offense, or I'm sorry, let's try this again. It's the number one defense, right? It's the Texans' number one defense going up against the Bills' number two offense. So we're talking about top two in the league on their respective sides of the ball. Bills number two in offense, Texans number one on defense. That to me should be a fun head-to-head, regardless of who wins the game. And I understand Texans fans aren't going to care about a fun head-to-head if the Texans don't win the game, because it makes your season all that more complicated and desperate. But sort of to the point of the competition part of it, the Texans defense is good enough to keep them in pretty much any game, or at the very least has been good enough to keep them in pretty much any game. So when we talk about the Texans having a championship caliber defense, this is what we're talking about. The type of defense that can help you win a game, that can be the reason why you win a game, and one that can help buy you time as you figure things out offensively, even if that's happening into your 11th game of the season. Even if that's happening on Thursday Night Football against a Buffalo Bills team that had Super Bowl aspirations and MVP at quarterback, and probably still feels like it could make some noise as long as it gets in, and they're probably going to get in. So the fact that you have this defense that really has kind of, I would even say, has carried you up into this point, that same defense I expect to be one that keeps you in this game. Remember, the only game that the Texans lost that they were not really in, that they were not really that competitive in, and this was pretty disappointing at the time because they were coming off of a bye week with extra time, a bye week on a Monday night. But it was that Monday night football game against the Seattle Seahawks. Just completely outmatched. Didn't seem like they came ready to play. Certainly not the offense, but even the defense early on in that game. It's the only game where I would say the defense for sure, overall, like all around, the Texans just straight up got outplayed, outmanned, outmatched, and did not deserve to win that game by any stretch. That's the only game on the schedule that's like that. Okay. They've played some peculiar opponents in terms of the makeup of those opponents when they faced them, right? The Ravens stand out. The San Francisco 49ers or another one that comes to mind. So, and that's two of their wins right there that we're talking about, two of their wins that were not that competitive. So there is that part of it. But the defense overall has been nails, money, for sure, a championship caliber defense. And I think a defense like that is one that's going to keep you in a game even like this. But here's my biggest question, and I want to bring Brandon's comment back about the Bills defense averaging, giving up 153 plus yards a game rushing. I had this pulled up a moment ago. I don't know if I still do. I guess I don't. But the Buffalo Bills, there's only one. No. There's two games all season. There have been two games all season, and I don't have it up, but I can kind of remember two games all season that they've played where they did not give up at least 100 yards rushing. Only two games. And one of those they lost anyway. See if I can find it. I just had it up. Two games all season where they didn't give up at least 100 yards rushing. And one of them they lost anyway. That one would have been to New England. So they didn't give up 100 yards rushing to New England, but they lost that game anyway. The only other opponent that they didn't give up 100 yards rushing to, Kansas City. They beat Kansas City. And we know Kansas City at times has had issues running the football. So everybody else run the football all over the Buffalo Bills. Swiss cheese, as they might say. So yeah, that's definitely one to point out. Okay. The Bills rank 13th in total defense, but here's why they're stuck somewhere right in the middle there. Their passing defense ranks second in the league. Second. This run defense that Brandon's talking about, that I'm talking about, ranks 31st. Okay. So this is the big part here. This is my big question when it comes to the Texans and whether they actually win this football game on Thursday night. Because what I presented as the whole theme and idea of this show, of this episode, is how the Texans can beat the Bills on Thursday night football, even without CJ Stroud. I'm telling you how they can do it. Will they do it? Will they do it? Can they actually do this and pull this off? That's going to be up to them on Thursday night football. But my big question is, can the Texans run the ball against a Bills run defense that, again, ranks next to last in the league? That, I believe, is where the game can be won for the Texans. I'm not as much worried about Davis Mills as I am the Texans' overall run game, the operation itself, because it wasn't good enough against the Titans. We've seen inconsistency now over these last couple of weeks. And I think a big part of their problem against Tennessee was just dealing with two of the better run stuffers in the game, or maybe one of the better run stuffing combinations at defensive tackle, or on the defensive line at the that the Titans present between Simmons and Sweat, but does it look better against Buffalo? Which you would have to think that it should, based off of how bad that they've been, based off of how bad they've been against the run, and the fact that even though the Texans haven't necessarily been great at it, they rank 23rd in rushing offense, right? And we've had conversations all year about who should be the priority back. Everybody asks every week what. Yeah, I think feel like we finally just stopped doing that. Where is Joe Mixon? Like the run game issues have been well documented and understood, but that's the question for me. That's the question for me. Does it look better against Buffalo, this run game? Because it should. The Bills defense is one that can be had in the run game. I also I also want to know what is the offensive line combination that they're going to come up with this week. Like they've done so many odd things over the last couple of weeks. They put out a dude that we had never heard of at guard. They moved their right tackle in this past game, Titus Howard, who has been their best offensive lineman, probably more than likely, probably their best offensive lineman this year. Moved him in at guard just because he's played guard before. They value his positional flex, if you will. Move him in at guard, and I guess to probably strengthen the run game because they saw something in Trent Brown in the previous game, made them feel like they were better off with Titus Howard and Trent Brown as the guard tackle combination on the right side, especially with Ed Ingram banged up. But yeah, I don't know. I don't I don't know about that. I didn't love it. I'm not a big fan of it. Titus Howard and Trent Brown were also both listed as limited participants in practice with knee injuries. Ed Ingram's also got a knee. That's what's had him sort of limited, but he was listed as a full participant on Monday. So, how does that, like, I wonder, I don't think this part has been asked and answered necessarily, but I wonder how much of their thought process in the last game was based on what Trent Brown had done in the previous game and how much, because D'Amico Ryans talked about it after the Jaguars game about how Trent Brown had been moving people and how impressed he was by it. But I wonder how much it was that and how much of it was like the decision to start him against the Titans, Trent Brown, that is. How much of it was Brown's performance and how much of it was Ed Ingram's health and sort of making that same calculation that we're trying to make here right now with CJ Stroud and Davis Mills. Like if he's cleared or kind of ready to go but rusty, and like, do you just rather go with the guy that just played the week before instead? So I want to see what they do. Do they go back to Howard at tackle and Ingram at guard now that he's fully healthy, or at least appears to be fully healthy according to the injury report, and then just leave Trent Brown as their break the glass guy? That to me seems to make a little bit more sense. But of course, we'll have to see what they do. So Brandon points out that Trent Brown had the best run blocking grade on PFF of all our O linemen. I don't think that there is any disputing that Trent Brown is a mammoth of a man and very much a force in the run game. Their nastiest, I think so far, their nastiest run blocker that we've seen so far. And we've seen some guys try to at least do their best to try to get after it in the run game. They just didn't have it quite like this. The body mass and the strength. This dude is 6'8", look like 400 pounds, man. He's a beast in the run game. You're right. You're correct. The issue is he doesn't move very well. And that part is just painfully obvious. Between the coming off of the patellar injury, the age and the mileage, the size, the size itself, all the weight that he's carrying. He's tall. It hadn't played in a while up until the last couple of weeks. He doesn't move very well. So if you get a speed rusher on him, if you just got any, he doesn't even have to necessarily be like an elite pass rusher. It's just got to be a dude that can move pretty well. and he's a liability. He can be a liability in the passing game. Definitely can be. That's not to say that Titus Howard hasn't been beat. We've seen that happen a time or two. But I just think that they're a better combination. Put it to you this way: I just think that Titus Howard is their better overall right tackle if he's good to go. If he's good to do that, that's what I would do. Now, kind of to my point, and I don't want to argue against myself here, but like Brandon's pointing out that he had the best run blocking grade. Well, I am sitting here saying that running the football is the way to win this game. I'm just not out here trying to create no liabilities elsewhere where you don't need to. Don't think that Titus has been bad in the run game. But if your argument, if you want to like support my argument of the run game being and them figuring that out being the key to their success in this game, I'll entertain this idea that Trent Brown should be out there. But to me, it just seems a little risky, seems a little dicey out there. It's work. I mean, I'm saying that, and it's worked for them the last couple of weeks. They've won the game. So, yeah, I love this opportunity, man. I really do. I love this opportunity for the Texans. I'm gonna be real with y'all. I don't want to like fake the funk and be like, just because I'm trying to tell you how they can beat the Bills, that I feel like they necessarily will. I'm just not feeling it. And I'm not knocking you or trying to discourage you, but I don't know how you could be feeling it after Sunday. I think I told y'all I nodded off twice in that game. I nodded off twice during the game. My girl and my daughter are sitting next to me in our little movie room and are like kind of just checking to see are my eyes still open because I'm kind of dropping and getting kind of quiet and giving those, how when you nod off, you start giving fake responses to things when people say stuff. Like you're falling asleep, but you can hear somebody talking to you, and so you go, yeah, yeah. You might give a fake laugh or something like that. I was pulling that number during this game. I had my loved ones talking to me, and I don't think I was hearing them because I was asleep. And the only thing that woke me up, the only thing that kept me up, I would say, was the part that I really needed to be paying attention to the game. I was doing TV that night. I was going to be on KHOU that night. Also, hope y'all caught that. Myself with Jason Bristol and Zach Taratara and Seth Payne. Thought we did a good job kind of breaking down the Texans and state of affairs after the game. But anyway, like, I don't know, man. This was just it was aside from it being a rough watch, I thought it was bad enough to be called embarrassing that they couldn't do better than that against against the Titans. And I think I saw Andre Johnson. I didn't get to see the whole clip, but I know my guy John Crumpler interviewed Andre Johnson on his podcast or on some kind of social media platform or some form. And just from what I can tell, or what I could tell, maybe from the caption, was Andre Johnson talking about how the Texans get one-dimensional sometimes when they're unable to run the football. Bruh, thank you. Like, thank you, somebody with a little bit more credibility. A little bit more credibility. I'm really feeling myself. Someone with way more credibility than I do. The Hall of Famer Andre Johnson speaking what is probably just the obvious. Like, you can't run the football and then your offense is just not so prolific that, hey, it don't matter. We the 2007 Patriots. We're gonna throw it on you. We the early 2000s Rams. We're gonna throw it on you anyway. Like, it's just not that type of program. It's not that type of party going on. So the passing game is not good enough to be one dimensional. Therefore, they do need some balance in their attack. Most teams do. Almost every team does. And yeah, in football is just that kind of game. You need to be able to run the football. But he's pointing that out, and I think that that's an important thing to think about with the Texans. Is like what is this? What is this run game ultimately supposed to be? Given that they have staked their identity in this. And the running backs look good. Like Woody Marks is emerging as I thought he would as their top back. Nick Chubb, I think, fits perfectly as their other back and could be their top back at any moment. Like I'm not so high on either one of the backs that I feel like it's just gotta be this guy, or so down on the other guy that I feel like, man, he shouldn't be getting the carries. Like the bulk of the carries going to Woody Marks makes sense because he's the younger and less injured of the two backs. So that just makes sense to me. But as far as what they offer you and what they bring you, I like the backs. It's just the overall operation itself that doesn't quite have the consistency that I feel like that it needs. So again, I love the opportunity that's in front of the Texans, really because no one, y'all got to think about this, man. No one actually thinks that the Texans can pull this off. Nobody. And when I say this, whether we're talking about them going up against the Bills on Thursday Night Football, or whether we're talking about them as a playoff team, no one but Texans fans, no one but the most diehard loyalists view this as a playoff team. The best teams that they've beaten are the San Francisco 49ers and the Jacksonville Jaguars. The 49ers, as we remember, were badly injured in that game. And I don't think anyone really believes in the Jacksonville Jaguars. I know they had an impressive win over the Chargers over the weekend, but I don't think anybody really is all that impressed by them. And I saw this, that the Athletic, they've got their playoff simulator, and y'all can go look at how they calculate their live in-season playoff simulator over at the Athletic. There's a science behind it. I ain't got the patience or bandwidth to try to explain it, but the Athletic, reputable enough of a publication for you to take this for whatever grain of salt and whatever face value that you like. But the Athletic is giving the Texans a 23% chance of making the playoffs in their playoff simulator. 23%. Okay. That is the lowest percentage of any, okay, or I should say that is the lowest percentage for any of the AFC teams with 4 or 5 losses. Of course, the Texans have 5. So they should be right there with the other teams with 5. But of any of the AFC teams with 4 or 5 losses, the Texans have the lowest percentage of making the playoffs according to the Athletics playoffs simulator. According to the Athletics playoff simulator. Now, that is pretty much that. I feel like that pretty much spells it out how they're viewed publicly. The NFC comparison to that would be the Panthers, who have a similar percentage and are also a 5. They're 6-5, but they're also a 5-loss team right now. No one's really saying they're bad, but no one is also really mistaking them for good or like a legitimate threat to make noise like late in the playoffs, or if they even make it, right? No one is looking at them that way. Right? Texans beat the Jaguars, hung in there against the Broncos. Probably should have beaten them. But who is this team exactly? Who is this team exactly? And why is it that their latest opportunity to show us against what a lot of us felt like should have been an automatic win, a stat game for some of the people in the game, like it didn't show it. Who is the team? Who is this team exactly? The only game, again, we mentioned this, the only game that they've lost that wasn't really competitive was the Monday Night Football game against Seattle. Every other game, they've either been in it or in a few cases, they've blown the opponent out. It's actually kind of funny to see that their first 3 wins were really convincing as they were, and that the last 2 have been won at the last minute. So, yeah, man, I think the Texans can beat the Bills without CJ Stroud, and I just laid out for you how they can beat the Bills without CJ Stroud. Do I think that they will? Man, am I confident that they will? It's a weird thing, man. For a while, I was doing pretty good at picking Texans games. For the first, 4 or 5 weeks of the season, I was on a roll. And then I feel like ever since the bye week, like when I pick them to win, they lose. When I pick them to lose, they win. Can't get a good feel for them. Can't get a good feel for this 500 team. Trying to. But I think this is possible. I do want to, since this came up on the KHOU Sports Extra show that I did on Sunday, and Jalen Petrie was on the injury report as a limited participant, that is a good sign. That is good to see, because while I think that Jalen Petrie is more of a luxury item than a necessity for this already stud defense, for this already, I think, championship caliber defense, whether he plays or not, I think the uniqueness of Jalen Petrie does provide some value, right? Like the kind of Josh Allen's sort of backyard ball nature, to me, fits like a glove with Jalen Petrie's instincts and his willingness to get involved with any kind of play, any kind of physicality. Okay. Now, he doesn't really necessarily match up physically with Josh Allen, but you understand what I'm saying. Like, the dude just does not have no fear and has a knack for the football. You think of Josh Allen, even though he's gotten better over the years with the turnovers and everything, you kind of think of him as still kind of turnover prone, and Jalen Petrie as opportunistic, if nothing else. So I think that's going to be big if he's able to play. That was a good sign. At least both of the dudes with concussions wasn't non-participants. At least you got one of your concussed dudes back. The other concussed dude, probably more valuable, probably more needed. But beggars can't be choosers. And these things kind of move at their own pace. Situations is different. We saw that hit that he took. We saw that hit that he took. Now, and if you recoiled the way I did when I saw the hit, you should not be that surprised that it's taking a little while for this thing to clear itself up. I think once we get a chance to hear from CJ, and who knows, like, I say who knows, I think we do know and can expect for CJ to approach this with a kind of like a humble spirit, a grateful attitude for being back and for his health, and like he's gonna thank God and all of that. But I do wonder what the potential long-term ramifications could be. Like, what are we starting to talk about with the concussions when you had one your rookie year that kept you out for a couple of weeks, and now you got another one that could potentially keep you out for 3.5 games? That's something to talk about. Dude is about to be up for an extension, eligible for a contract extension that's going to be lucrative. That is going to be it's going to be the biggest one that the Texans have ever paid in the history of their franchise, because it's the most recent franchise quarterback. So that's always going to be a new number whenever that happens for them. How they feeling about that? And that's not me trying to be in the man's pockets or nothing like that. CJ Stroud is a great player and is already wealthy. I wish him continued wealth and health and success and all of that. That's not what it's about. It's about trying to figure out, like, we're really just trying to get a good beat on how things have kind of evolved with the CJ Stroud conversation from his rookie year to now. And I want to be clear, I still feel like he's the franchise quarterback. I still believe in the guy. But it's hard to ignore some of these things that have come up that at least raise questions or raise conversations, if maybe that's the better word. Because when I say question, I feel like I'm questioning the player, I'm not questioning the player or the quality of the player. I'm questioning the overall situation, right? The hey, the health, the regression, and how much of that had to do with what we surrounded him with, how much of that had to do with him, and then what does that say about what we need to surround what we need to surround him with, and how we need to go about building this team in the future. Something to talk about further down the road. We ain't got to spend no Monday night and Tuesday morning on that, but it is, I would say, like, just to be fair and real about it, I say that's something that's like, you know, let's just say in the back of my mind. All right. So that's that. That's how I think the Texans can beat the Bills on Thursday night football, even without CJ Stroud. I appreciate Brandon for getting it cracking in the chat. Encourage y'all to do the same, man. Let your boy know you're here. Come rock with you, boy. Let people know as well. I'm gonna be trying to do a lot more of these lives as I have time, as I have the space and the bandwidth to do so. And yeah, let's just have a good time with it, man. Want to do that, man. Want to shout out everyone who joined the live, everyone who's listening to the podcast on the audio platforms only. Make sure that you subscribe to the B Block Podcast. You can do that wherever it is that you get your podcast. Also, check us out on YouTube. Rate us, review us, tell a friend. And until next time, y'all be good.